Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a hidden history that honestly might just be sitting right next door to you. We're talking about a legacy of secret science. Together, we're going to explore the preserved remains of literally some of the most dangerous innovations in human warfare. Now, you might be thinking, secret experiments? Really? But yeah, for an entire century, governments have been running these covert tests. We're talking about everything from nerve agents to engineered biological plagues. And the wildest part? These tests were sometimes conducted directly on their own citizens. It's a full 100 years of testing that was deliberately kept entirely in the shadows. Which really forces us to ask what exactly happens behind the fences of, ordinary science campuses. Because from the outside, these facilities look incredibly mundane. They've got manicured lawns, your standard security fences, completely normal office buildings. But the reality of what went on inside those walls was entirely different. The stark contrast between that everyday exterior and the extraordinary, frankly lethal science happening inside, well, that's exactly what makes this hidden history so compelling. All right, let's get right into it with Section 1, Forbidden Research Sites, the physical reality. Because we need to establish right away that these aren't just myths. These are actual, verifiable locations. It turns out, governments were basically pursuing two parallel tracks of destruction. On one hand, you had Porton Down, which represented a deep dive into advanced synthetic chemical research. And then on the other hand, you had places like Gruinard Island, a literal biological nightmare that was just absolutely riddled with uncontrollable organic horror, like anthrax. So you've got two different sites, two totally different methodologies, but an equally terrifying scope of military research. Moving on to Section 2, the mechanics of lethality, demystifying the weapons. Let's switch gears and look closely at the hard science here. To start, let's talk about the VX nerve agent. Now, this is the most lethal chemical ever made by humanity. And look, that isn't just hyperbole. It is a clinical, objective fact derived straight from the data. When we talk about facilities like Porton Down and their chemical research, VX is the absolute pinnacle of that reality. The sheer unparalleled lethality of this agent represents the absolute extreme of what human beings can engineer when the sole goal is pure chemical destruction. But biological weapons, they operate entirely differently. Take anthrax, which is exactly what made Gruinard Island so notoriously dangerous. The clinical mechanics are chillingly simple. Once the spores enter an environment and a host becomes infected, that's when the true danger really begins, because the spores actually lie dormant. Unlike a chemical agent that might eventually disperse or break down, a biological plague like this physically embeds itself into the earth. It just waits there, as a living, dormant threat looking for its next opportunity to infect. And we're not talking about a short-term problem here. These anthrax spores don't just survive in the dirt for a few days or a couple weeks. They remain highly infectious for decades. Decades! To put that into perspective, at Gruinard Island, the Earth itself was rendered deeply toxic and highly infectious for literal generations before a successful disinfection could finally be achieved. It's just a staggering timeline for an environmental hazard. Which brings us to Section 3, Toxic Time Capsules, a lasting ecological warning. Let's zoom out a bit and look at the big picture. Ultimately, these facilities act as toxic time capsules, preserving the most dangerous innovations of human warfare. We really can't just view these places as, abandoned labs or closed chapters of some old history book. Because of exactly how these chemicals and biological agents persist, like that anthrax living in the soil for generations, these sites actively preserve the most dangerous, forbidden military science of the past century. It's basically all buried right there, just beneath the surface of the Earth. So, what does this all mean for us today? Well, if a century of secret experiments gave us sites like Porton Down and Gruinard Island, what other toxic time capsules might be waiting out there to be opened? What else might be lying dormant behind the fences of ordinary-looking campuses, just waiting to be uncovered?